The provocation. Nova Haven gleamed like a sapphire against the velvet backdrop of space, a testament to humanity's resilience and ingenuity. For 73 years, the colony had thrived on the edge of the Orion Arm, far from Earth's protective embrace but rich with opportunity. Families built homes beneath the twin moons, farmers cultivated the rich violet soil, and children played beneath trees that sang when the wind blew through their crystalline leaves. Admiral Ilara Voss remembered those trees. She had planted one herself during the colony's 50th anniversary celebration, her brother Tomas watching with pride as the colony governor he'd helped elect. That had been 3 years ago. Now she stood rigid on the bridge of the UTS Resolute, her flagship, staring at the empty space where Nova Haven should be. "Replay the last transmission," she ordered, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. Lieutenant Darius Kell nodded, his dark fingers dancing across the console. The holographic display flickered, showing a young woman with laugh lines around her eyes. Voss recognized her as Nova Haven's communication officer, Melody Reeves. "Monthly report from Nova Haven to Earth Command. All systems nominal. Agricultural output exceeding projections by 17%. Governor Voss sends his regards to—" The transmission cut abruptly, replaced by a single piercing tone that made everyone on the bridge wince. Then nothing but static. "That was 36 hours ago," Commander Nicholas Frost said, his weathered face grim beneath salt-and-pepper hair. "Scout vessels arrived 12 hours later." The display shifted to footage from the reconnaissance ships. Where Nova Haven once stood, only ruins remained. Buildings melted like candles left too close to a flame. The famous crystalline forest reduced to puddles of gleaming liquid. And everywhere evidence of the colony's 15,000 inhabitants, not as corpses, but as shadows burned into walls, floors, and walkways, frozen in their final moments. "No radiation signatures matching known weapons," LT. Commander Priya Suresh reported, her voice clinical despite the horror in her eyes. "No debris from orbital bombardment, no evidence of ground invasion." "But we did find this," Frost said quietly. The display changed again, showing the colony's central administrative tower, or what remained of it. Etched into the melted alloy wall was a symbol, a perfect hexagon with a spiral flowing inward, ending in what looked like an eye. Admiral Voss stared at the symbol, her face a mask of calm that belied the fury building inside her. Somewhere in those ruins was her brother, reduced to a shadow on a wall. "Any match in xenographic databases?" she asked. "None, Admiral," Suresh replied. "It's not Arcturian, not Proximan, not any species we've encountered." Voss nodded once, decision made. "Send the symbol to Earth Command with Priority Alpha and prepare a fleet-wide broadcast." The bridge crew exchanged glances. A fleet-wide broadcast meant one thing: war. Within 24 hours, humanity's response shook the stars. The United Terran Fleet, previously scattered across dozens of systems, converged with cold precision. Civilian vessels were commandeered, retrofitted with hastily manufactured weapon systems. Corporate mining vessels abandoned their operations, their massive drills now pointed outward like spears. Colonies sent their defense forces without hesitation. From her command center on the Resolute, Admiral Voss watched as the fleet assembled in high orbit above Jupiter. 700,000 ships strong, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. "The politicians are screaming," Frost informed her, handing over a datapad. "The diplomatic corps wants to attempt communication first." "There was a communication," Voss replied, her eyes never leaving the armada assembling before her. "It was burned into the side of my brother's headquarters. Whoever they are, they've made their intentions clear." Earth Security Council gave their reluctant approval after 12 tense hours of debate. Operation Nightfall was greenlit, the first preemptive strike in human history against an unknown aggressor. The fleet moved like a steel tide through the void, following the faint quantum disturbance trail leading from Nova Haven's ruins. The path led to an unmapped region beyond the Perseus void, a place stellar cartographers had labeled simply as the darkness, due to its unusual lack of visible stars. On the 30th day of transit, they found their first clue, a derelict ship of unknown origin drifting at the edge of the darkness. Its design defied conventional physics, curves and angles existing in ways that hurt the human eye. "No life signs," reported Dr. Octavia Drexel, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, her voice tinny through the boarding team's comms. "But there's evidence of recent occupation. And Admiral, the interior architecture matches the symbol found on Nova Haven." The boarding team transmitted images that spread like wildfire through the fleet, walls that seemed to breathe, corridors that twisted into impossible geometries, and everywhere that same spiral hexagon etched into surfaces like a religious icon. "We found their navigation system," Lieutenant Wei Zhao announced, his excitement palpable even through the static. "It contains coordinates, thousands of them. One matches Nova Haven exactly." A chill ran through the command staff of the Resolute. These weren't random attackers. This was a species that had been watching humanity, cataloging their colonies, perhaps for years. "Can you determine their origin point?" Voss asked. "Yes, Admiral, it's at the center of the darkness." 3 days later, the fleet reached the edge of a massive stellar anomaly, a region of space where light itself seemed to bend and distort. Traditional sensors failed, communications became erratic, and several smaller vessels reported navigation systems spontaneously rebooting. "It's not natural," Chief Science Officer Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura explained, his hologram flickering before the assembled commanders. "This region has been artificially manipulated at the quantum level. It's like someone rewrote the laws of physics within this bubble of space." Before Voss could respond, alarms blared across the fleet. Emerging from the distortion came vessels of impossible design, hundreds of them, then thousands, their hulls shifting and reforming like liquid metal given life. "All ships battle formations," Voss commanded, her voice iron. "Defensive protocols Alpha through Delta." The human fleet responded with practiced precision, forming the multi-layered defense grid they had drilled for weeks. But the alien vessels didn't attack. Instead, they arranged themselves in a perfect hexagonal pattern, mirroring the symbol from Nova Haven. Then silence. "They're broadcasting," Communications Officer Layla Nazari reported, her fingers flying over her console. I think it's an attempt at communication." The main viewscreen flickered, and every human on the bridge felt a primal fear grip their spine. The being that appeared wasn't shaped like any known form of life. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, parts of it fading in and out of visibility. Its face, if such a term applied, contained multiple sensory organs arranged around a central spiral pattern. "We are the Eternals," came a voice directly into their minds, bypassing the communication system entirely. "We have watched your kind spread like a virus across the stars. Nova Haven was a warning you failed to heed." Admiral Voss stepped forward. "I am Admiral Ilara Voss of the United Terran Fleet. You murdered 15,000 civilians without provocation or declaration of hostile intent. Explain yourselves." The creature's form rippled, almost like laughter. "Provocation? Your very existence is provocation. Your species consumes, expands, reproduces without limit. The universe has patterns that must be maintained, order that must be preserved." "And that justifies genocide?" Voss demanded. "We have culled countless species across eons," the being replied indifferently. "Those who cannot control their growth cannot be permitted to continue. It is the cosmic law we enforce." Throughout the fleet, the same message echoed in every human mind. Captains gripped their chairs, gunners steadied their hands, engineers redoubled their efforts at their stations, all united by a single thought. These creatures had appointed themselves the arbiters of who deserved to exist. The reckoning. The first wave of human weapons passed harmlessly through the eternal vessels, dissipating into the distorted space beyond. On the bridge of the Resolute, a stunned silence fell before erupting into frantic activity. "Phase shift technology," Dr. Nakamura said, his fingers flying across his console. "They're partially out of sync with our reality." Admiral Voss's expression hardened. Adapt targeting parameters, switch to quantum-locked projectiles and wide-spectrum energy weapons. The human fleet's response was immediate, ships across the Armada reconfiguring their weapon systems. But the Eternals weren't waiting. Their vessels surged forward, moving with fluid grace that defied the laws of physics. As they approached, they began to change, morphing from ships into something else, vast, tentacled structures that reached across space itself. "Brace for impact," Commander Frost shouted. The first Eternal vessel to reach the human formation didn't collide with its target, it passed through it. The UTS Defiant, a heavy cruiser on the front line, shuddered violently as the alien structure intersected with its hull. Inside, crew members collapsed screaming, their minds overwhelmed by visions no human was meant to comprehend. Within seconds, the entire ship went dark, drifting lifeless. "They're attacking the crews directly," Dr. Drexel reported, her voice trembling as data poured in from across the fleet. "Some kind of psychic assault. Neural patterns scrambled on contact." Voss watched in horror as dozens of ships fell silent, their crews incapacitated or worse. This wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. "Fall back to Formation Omega," she ordered. "Maintain distance. All ships deploy psionic dampening fields." The dampening technology, developed after humanity's brief war with the telepathic Proximan Collective, hadn't been tested against anything this powerful. But it was all they had. As the fleet regrouped, Lieutenant Commander Jin Hayashi approached Voss, his eyes bright with desperate inspiration. "Admiral, I have an idea. The Eternals exist partially outside our dimensional plane. That's why conventional weapons can't touch them. But what if we fight fire with fire?" "Explain," Voss demanded. "Project Horizon. It was experimental, never approved for deployment, but the prototypes are aboard the science vessel Prometheus." Voss remembered the classified briefing, dimensional disruptors designed to counter theoretical extra-dimensional entities. The technology had been deemed too dangerous, potentially capable of tearing holes in reality itself. "Get me Captain Renata Torres on the Prometheus," Voss ordered. Minutes later, Torres' face appeared on screen, her laboratory visible behind her. "Admiral, we have 12 prototype disruptors. They're unstable and untested in combat conditions." "Can they hurt these things?" Torres took a deep breath. "In theory, yes. They generate a localized dimensional inversion field. Anything caught inside would be forcibly pulled into our reality plane and locked here. But the power requirements are massive and the range is limited." "Deploy them," Voss ordered. "We'll create an engagement zone and lure the Eternals in." The battle plan formed with desperate speed. 100 ships, including the Resolute, would form a tight formation around the Prometheus. The rest of the fleet would fall back, creating the illusion of retreat. When the Eternals pursued, they would spring the trap. As the human fleet executed the maneuver, the Eternals seemed to hesitate, their vessels hovering at the edge of sensor range. "They're communicating," Nazari reported. "Complex quantum signals, I can't decode them, but the pattern suggests debate." Then, without warning, the void at the center of the Eternal fleet began to distort. Space itself folded inward, creating a vortex of absolute darkness. From within this cosmic wound emerged a vessel unlike any other, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with energy, radiating power that made instruments across the human fleet fluctuate wildly. "New contact," Kane reported, his voice hushed. "Size comparison places it at roughly 15 kilometers in length. Energy readings are off the charts." The mental voice that touched their minds was deeper, older than the first, a presence so vast it felt like drowning in an ocean of alien consciousness. "I am the Overseer. You have surprised us, ephemeral ones. In a billion years of maintaining cosmic order, few species have responded to culling with such ferocity." Voss stood, hands clenched at her sides. "We haven't even begun to show you ferocity." The Overseer's amusement washed over them like a cold wave. "Your defiance is noted, unprecedented. I will study your species more thoroughly before your extinction." As the transmission ended, the trap was sprung. The Prometheus activated all 12-dimensional disruptors simultaneously, creating a cascading field of reality-warping energy. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Eternal vessels caught in the field screamed in frequencies that shattered sensors, their fluid forms solidifying into brittle crystalline structures. "It's working," Hayashi shouted. "They're being forced into our dimensional plane." "All ships open fire on the affected targets," Voss commanded. Human weapons tore into the now vulnerable Eternal vessels, shattering them into glittering fragments. For the first time since the battle began, humanity drew blood. The Overseer's reaction was swift and terrible. Its massive vessel pulsed once, and a wave of pure force expanded outward, disrupting the dimensional fields and sending the Prometheus spinning away, its hull cracked and venting atmosphere. "The Prometheus is hit," Tors reported, her transmission breaking up. "Disruptors failing, we can't," her transmission cut off abruptly. From across the fleet, reports flooded in of crew members collapsing, their minds under assault. The Overseer had shifted its attack strategy, focusing its immense psychic power against the human defenders. On the Resolute's bridge, Commander Frost collapsed, blood streaming from his nose and ears. Others followed, screaming as alien thoughts invaded their minds. Voss felt it too, a pressure building behind her eyes, visions of cosmic horror threatening to overwhelm her consciousness. Through sheer force of will, she remained standing, though blood trickled from her nose. "Emergency Protocol Sierra," she gasped to those still conscious. "All ships, neural isolation." Across the fleet, automated systems engaged, flooding crew compartments with a neurochemical mist designed to dampen higher brain functions. A last-ditch defense against psychic attack that would leave crews conscious but emotionally detached. The effect was immediate if incomplete. Many fell permanently silent, their minds shattered beyond recovery, but the majority of the fleet remained operational. In this moment of respite, Commander Jace Merrick, second in command of the heavy carrier UTS Thunderchild, made a decision that would change the course of the battle. With Captain Ortiz incapacitated, command fell to him. "All fighter squadrons prepare for dimensional warhead deployment," he ordered, his voice flat under the influence of the neural suppressants. The Thunderchild's fighter bays opened, disgorging hundreds of small, agile craft. Each carried a single payload, miniaturized versions of the dimensional disruptors, fitted onto standard nuclear warheads. The technology was experimental, cobbled together by the Thunderchild's engineering team during the long journey to the darkness. "This is Commander Merrick to all fighter pilots," he broadcast. "Target the Overseer vessel, penetrate its outer defenses and detonate directly against the hull. Dimensional warheads will create localized breaches in its protective field." One by one, the fighters acknowledged, their pilots' voices eerily calm under neural suppression. "Thunderchild to Resolute," Merrick communicated to Admiral Voss. "Request permission to execute Operation Spearhead." On the Resolute, Voss wiped blood from her face, considering the plan. It was suicidal, the fighters would almost certainly be destroyed before reaching their target. But if even a few got through... "Impact imminent," Kane reported, watching through the fighters' transmitted video feeds. 5 fighters remaining, 3, 1. The feed cut out as the final fighter, piloted by Lieutenant Zara Donovan, crashed directly into what sensors identified as a critical junction on the Overseer vessel. Her dimensional warhead detonated, creating a localized reality fracture that tore through the alien ship's defenses. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the crystalline structure began to crack, lines of brilliant energy spreading across its surface like lightning. "The dimensional breach is destabilizing its form," Dr. Nakamura reported, his voice filled with wonder despite the neural suppressants. "It's being pulled fully into our reality plane." The Overseer vessel shuddered, its magnificent form distorting as it was forced to exist completely within 3-dimensional space. Parts of it simply ceased to exist, unable to translate from higher dimensions. Voss saw their opportunity. "All ships, concentrate fire on the breach point, everything we have." 700,000 human vessels opened fire simultaneously, pouring destruction into the wounded Leviathan. Energy beams, relativistic projectiles, antimatter warheads, the combined firepower of humanity's wrath focused on a single point. The Overseer's mental voice lashed out one final time, filled with something humans had never expected to hear from such an entity: fear. "What have you done? We are eternal, we are the balance." "We are humanity," Voss replied silently, knowing the creature could hear her thoughts. "And we decide our own fate." The Overseer vessel erupted in a cataclysm of light and energy, the explosion distorting space-time itself. As it died, the remaining Eternal ships began to withdraw, retreating into the folds of the darkness from which they had emerged. In the aftermath, Admiral Voss stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, looking out at what remained of her fleet. They had lost nearly 200,000 ships, millions of lives gone, but humanity had survived, not just survived, but achieved the impossible. They had killed a god. "What now, Admiral?" asked Suresh, joining her at the viewport. The neural suppressants had worn off, leaving the crew emotionally raw but functional. Voss watched as recovery vessels moved through the debris field, searching for survivors. In the distance, scientific ships were already beginning to study the eternal technology. "Now we rebuild," she said quietly. "And we prepare. The Eternals retreated, but they'll be back. They've been culling species for billions of years. They won't stop because of one defeat." "But next time we'll be ready for them," Suresh said with quiet determination. Voss nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars beyond. The Eternals had sought to exterminate humanity as a cosmic aberration, a species that refused to know its place. Instead, they had forged something new, a humanity united by existential threat, tempered in the fire of impossible victory. As the fleet turned toward home, carrying news of their victory and warning of wars to come, Voss thought of Nova Haven, of her brother, of the 15,000 souls whose shadows remained burned into the ruins of their colony. Their deaths had not been in vain. They had awakened humanity to the true nature of the cosmos, beautiful, terrifying, and filled with forces that considered themselves gods. But gods could bleed, gods could die, and humanity would no longer bow to any power that sought to limit its potential among the stars. The Terran Empire was born not from conquest, but from defiance, the unshakable resolve of a species that, when faced with extinction, chose instead to fight back against the very architects of cosmic order. And the universe would never be the same.